Good evening, my name is Katarzyna Nowicka and welcome to Poland Daily News. The European Council, which held a meeting today on the crisis in Belarus, unanimously declared the presidential elections held on the 9th of August invalid and demanded that they be repeated. Further demonstrations against President Lukashenko's regime are expected to be held tonight in Minsk and other Belarusian cities.
The European Council does not recognize the results of the presidential elections in Belarus and calls for them to be repeated. The leaders of the European countries which took part in the virtual summit dedicated to Belarus also called on the authorities in Minsk to stop the violence against the participants of civil protests. Earlier, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, an opposition candidate considered to be the winner of the 9th of August election, posted another video on social media in which she appealed to European leaders not to recognize the result of the presidential election and help Belarusians to fight for their rights.
Honorable leaders of Europe, for the second week in a row, my nation is fighting peacefully for its constitutional right to elect its leaders. The August 9th elections were neither fair nor transparent. The results were falsified. People who went out to defend their vote in the streets of their cities all across Belarus were brutally beaten, imprisoned, and tortured by the regime desperately clinging onto power. Hundreds were injured. At least 2 people lost their lives. This is taking place right now in the middle of Europe.
Tikhanovskaya called on the international community not to recognize Alexander Lukashenko as president of Belarus, stressing that her country needs help from outside like never before.
I call on you not to recognize these fraudulent elections. Mr. Lukashenko has lost all the legitimacy in the eyes of our nation and the world. In order to facilitate the peaceful transition of power in my country, I have initiated the National Coordination Council of Belarus. It will lead the process of the peaceful transition of power via dialogue. It will immediately call for a new, fair and democratic presidential elections with international supervision. Honorable leaders of Europe, I call on you to support the awakening of Belarus. I call on all countries to respect the principles of international law. I call to respect the sovereignty of Belarus and the choice of Belarusian people.
Meanwhile, Alexander Lukashenko continues to strongly reject any dialogue with the opposition and accuses the West of interfering in the internal affairs of Belarus. Some Western countries' representatives made statements, including some countries' leaders who do not actually know where Belarus is and what is really going on here. Today, a 43-year-old Brest citizen who was shot during the protests on August 11th died in a hospital in Minsk. The man is the 3rd fatal victim of the demonstrations in Belarus. According to independent media, another demonstration against Lukashenko's regime is planned for tonight in Minsk.
The Polish Minister of Health, Szumowski, announced his resignation from the post of head of ministry yesterday afternoon. Szumowski, who was a guest on TV Republika's journalistic poker, argued that he had chosen the optimal moment to leave his post and ensured he left his successor a well-prepared team.
I did promise that I will stick to the original plan to finish certain projects in past spring, and unexpectedly the coronavirus epidemic erupted. I did remain at my post. Today, after considering all of the possible scenarios, we have a stable situation and the whole ministerial team is well prepared. I think that now is a good time to safely transfer my duties into the hands of my successor. he or she will exactly know what the next steps are. When speaking about any regrets I may have or any sorrow connected to this decision, I must say that it is difficult to leave such a wonderful team of people. I did not realize that it is possible for such a team to exist in a government office on a national level. This is a fantastic team of people, which has proven itself in very critical moments. This team is like a special forces team. It is able to make things happen and to react in a calm and professional way when problems arise. I think that the future Minister of Health will have fantastic people who will help to run day-to-day operations. I also declare my help, but as the outgoing team member, I will not impose my ideas, as this will be the decision and role of the new Minister of Health.
Bo to już jest decyzja, rola I kompetencje nowego ministra zdrowia.
The politicians of the Confederation Party do not agree with the positive assessment of the situation the Minister of Health has found himself in, and instead demand that he be put before the parliamentary committee.
It seems that Minister Szumowski is aware of this criminal activity. During his farewell press conference, he revealed his line of defense, saying, "I thank Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki for supporting me and making courageous decisions during the epidemic. It was him who ultimately decided what the restrictions and quarantine would look like."
Meanwhile, Waldemar Kraska, the Deputy Minister of Health, informed today that the ministry has finished working on the strategy for autumn for the expected peak in coronavirus and flu infections.
We want to decrease the number of specialized hospitals. We want to have one specialized hospital per each 2 provinces and to expand the capabilities of hospitals. Meanwhile, the hospitals which are now specialized but hadn't been before should have separate infectious and intensive care wards for patients who have trouble breathing. We also want to create isolation wards in almost all of the hospitals in Poland, so we could treat and examine patients who may have been infected with the coronavirus.
That's all for tonight. Now on to Poland Daily Business with Aleksander Wierzejski and his guest. Good night.